Hello and welcome to another video. This is my long-term review of the iPhone 11 Pro Max. If you are new to the channel, welcome. If you are returning, thank you so much for coming to another video. The first thing I would quickly like to discuss is the performance. The A13 Bionic is an amazing chip, and Apple continues to lead the industry in making some of the best SoCs on the market. To demonstrate this performance, I will be showing you Call of Duty Mobile. As you can see, this game is very smooth. Apple does very well in any task with using their chips. Everything runs very smoothly and seamlessly, and overall, it is a joy to use. I just want to quickly note that as we are going through this review, I will be testing the RAM by holding a bunch of things open, and we'll see how it goes. Next, and one of the most improved aspects of the phone, is the battery life. For once, Apple put a large enough battery in their phones. It's a 3969 milliamp hour battery, which is very comparable to many Android phones. Since iOS isn't as battery hungry as Android is, this is also a 60Hz display, and just overall optimizations lead to this phone being one of the best battery life phones on the market. I can easily get through one day and have about 30 to 40% of battery life on a medium use. On higher usage, I get about 10 to 20% left at the end of the day. It is important to note that this battery life isn't as good as when I first got the phone, because at those points I was ending the day with like 40 to 50% of battery life. One of the most vital components to a phone is its camera, and Apple knocked it out of the park with these cameras. We added an ultra-wide lens and very much improved still photos on this camera. I use this phone as my testing model for all my reviews, and right about now I will be showing you a comparison to various different cameras using the pictures I've gotten from this phone. Overall, Apple has set the bar this year. This camera is very well rounded. It is probably the best camera for video, and the stills can also compete with the best. Importantly, iOS has some of the great given features, such as AirDrop, iMessage, FaceTime. I also really enjoy the Apple Stocks app. I feel like it's one of the better ones. I like Apple News as well, and they gave me Apple TV free for the year for buying this phone, and I think they have some good stuff on there as well. Optimizations in particular apps are great on this phone, such as Twitter feels very optimized, Snapchat feels very optimized, and everything just works seamlessly and great. Speaking of seamlessly, the connections between different devices also work perfectly. You go onto your Mac and you can bring up tabs that's on your phone. You get your iMessage there, your FaceTime. Everything in the Apple ecosystem always works very well together, and that is one of the greatest features of iOS. One essential aspect of a phone for me is a phone's speakers, and Apple kicks this out of the park. I watch a lot of YouTube on my phone without headphones in, so having great speakers is essential. So right here, I'm just trying to show you an aspect ratio of what YouTube will look like with somebody who shoots in content like Marques Brownlee. But we're going to go over to my video just as a quick basis to show you a little about the speakers. What somebody in 2020 would want to do. So this particular one I don't even have the best mic as other people do, but this sounds great. So I think that the speakers are a big advantage to buying the iPhone. Another underrated feature is the haptic engine. Everything feels so nice. With a haptic engine that's as good as Apple's, everything feels very premium. Then we also got the mute switch, and I think Android needs to put this on more phones. The OnePlus 7 Pro has the mute switch, but it's so useful for being in class and making sure my phone is not going to go off, and things like that. Finally, of the advantages to buying this phone, I would like to talk about the connections around people. I live in a very dominated Apple area in a college town, so having an iPhone makes connections very easy. It plays a role in what people decide they're going to get. As much as we will not like to admit it, the iPhone has this social status that makes people gravitate towards the device. Now I want to talk about some of the disadvantages. First, and everybody knows it, this is an extremely expensive phone. At $1,100, you're only getting 64 gigabytes of storage and 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is very low in comparison to the competitors. Even Google, who is very low at 64 gigabytes and 6 gigabytes of RAM, is priced cheaper than the $1,100 this phone is demanding. The design of the phone is also why you may or may not want to buy it. The stainless steel frame is great, and the display is solid, but we still got that notch up there. In 2020, although this phone came out in 2019, we still have a notch. This design is basically the same thing that came out in 2017. Apple has refused to update on anything less than a 3-year cycle for most of their products, and I feel that is a very big disadvantage. And although the display does seem outdated, the things that made me ultimately switch back to Android were the minor annoyances in iOS. For example, let's say we're going to make a phone call. It doesn't tell you when you are going to find that number. Like, if I started at 1, 2, 3, 4, it would show me on Android who the numbers are referring to, and then I can just click on that. Where on Apple, you have to type out the entire one. Also, the battery percentage, I can't see it without swiping down to the right. And I do find that to be quite annoying. The file management system is also poor in comparison to Android. In Apple CarPlay, the call interface takes over the entire thing, and you can't see your maps or anything. Not to mention, editing screenshots has become a lot more tedious in iOS 13. Overall, there's just a lot of those little minor annoyances that add up, and I made an entire list on them. If anyone wants me to publish that list, let me know in the comments section. I'll do it easily. On a different note, Siri is also way behind Google Assistant. I've said in previous videos how much I love Google Assistant, but Siri is just behind. And it was one of the first ones to come out. It was in the Steve Jobs era, so I'm just surprised that it's not improved as much as it should be. Siri, is Google Assistant better than you?
I offer no resistance to helpful assistance.
Yes, she offers no resistance and at the same time, no competition towards the other ones. I think Apple should become a little more competitive in this area because I find voice assistants to be extremely helpful. Although I praised iOS in talking about the advantages through seamless connections, through optimizations, there are still overall limitations that are still extremely annoying for Android users especially, like the home screen. I want to customize my home screen. I want to put my icons at in more reachable places, but still in iOS 13, that's not an option. Furthermore, the default apps. I like using Google Chrome over Safari, and I like using Gmail over their Mail app, but you can't switch those default applications currently. There's also multitasking. There's no form of multitasking on here, and this is a quite big phone. So I would like to multitask on the 11 Pro Max. And then it just makes things boring at times. These limitations from iOS just make things not as fun as if you can change things up on Android with a launcher, or download specific things from the internet, or just in general. The phone becomes boring over time. Also, I want to give a quick mention to the fact that I like Samsung Pay a lot more than Apple Pay, because there's no reward points on Apple Pay. Finally, I'd like a quick discussion on the lack of innovation on Apple's part. Since the passing of Steve Jobs, Apple has chosen to become the counterpunchers. And what this means for consumers is you're getting the newer features later than a lot of manufacturers do, such as Samsung and others. The quickest example is just the ultra wide camera. It was on a lot of phones before it came to the iPhone, but there's multiple occasions or examples that I could talk about in this regard. Alright, for some of the more neutral aspects, I want to first go back to the display. And overall, I feel the notch is hurting the display because the Infinity O display on the Samsung devices looks great. The OnePlus 7 Pro's entire display without any notch or cutout looks fantastic. And with this, it just feels outdated, especially at that price tag. Also, there are no 1440p displays on the iPhones yet. However, this is still a very good display, and that's why it's in the neutral category. There's no HDR Plus, but Dolby Vision's very good. The OLED on it's very nice. As you can see, the background I use, it makes the phone look great as well. You can use different app backgrounds, but I use Everpix. There's room for improvement in the display, but overall, I wouldn't say it is a negative factor or a positive one for this particular phone. Face ID is also improved since the iPhone 10. It's quicker, it works a little bit better angles, and it overall is a good biometrics option. I still prefer the in-display fingerprint scanner or a physical one, but I don't have many complaints about Face ID. Now let's quickly go through the RAM test. So we'll start at the back. We have Disney Plus. And this stayed in very well. So, good job, Apple, there. Next, we'll go to ESPN, and that did restart. Call of Duty Mobile had to restart as well. Stocks is good. Apple News is good. Twitter's good. And YouTube is good. So, it did a pretty good job in that little RAM test. But overall, you could see, I believe the iPhone would benefit from at least 6 gigabytes of RAM. Now here's the take-home message on if you should buy it or not. And I feel like that depends. If you upgrade your phone every year, or maybe every 2 years, I'd say yes, it's still a very solid option, as long as you prefer iOS, of course. But if you upgrade every 3 to 4 years, I'd say wait for the 12 because it's a lot more future-proof. It's going to be on that 3-year redesign cycle, so that's something to look forward to. And finally, the price is, of course, a huge factor. If you can afford this phone, it's a great option, but there are others out there. But if you can't, maybe try the iPhone 11. The iPhone 9 or SE2 is coming out soon. That's rumored at $400. And there are a lot of good budget options on the Google side already. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Please comment down below. I'm doing a giveaway, so I will put that link in the description. And peace.